Welcome to Coast View, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi, and Mississippi for that matter, such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, if you're a regular listener to this show, you know that over the course of over 800 conversations over the past 3 years, we've had a number of people from economic development, from the Center for Entrepreneurship at Mississippi State, from Innovate Mississippi to really dynamic and innovative entrepreneurs and corporate business leaders, nonprofit sector. We've talked a lot about the kind of things we need to do in Mississippi to improve this state. Oftentimes, access to the internet is a big deal. And as a result of that, broadband has become a big part of Mississippi's future. In fact, it's a big part of its present. But I've said on this show many times, because I spend a lot of time in the Mississippi Delta, that until we ultimately are able to bring the rural communities of Mississippi up, places like the Delta especially, that Mississippi's always going to kind of hover toward the bottom. If you were to take the rural areas of Mississippi Delta sort of out of the numbers for a second and just look at where Mississippi stands, what you'll find is Mississippi's probably somewhere in the middle in terms of its comparables related to other states in the United States. But we've got some challenges in the rural areas. And I've had people say over and over again on this show, and I have repeated it, that creating broadband access is probably one of the most significant economic development things we can do. But it's going to give people opportunity they would have never had. I could just go on and on. It's important to the ability to attract industry to the state. It's important if we're thinking about the number of people who can work remotely and having that kind of access for them. But I could go on. But what I'm excited today to have is Sally Doty, who is the executive director of the Office of Broadband Expansion and Accessibility of Mississippi. BEAM is the acronym, but she's basically head of everything broadband in the state of Mississippi. Was appointed by Governor Tate Reeves, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know her better this morning. But how you doing, Sally?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show.
So you don't disagree with anything I said at the beginning of this show, do you?
I say amen to everything that you said, and I think we're past the point of debating the need for broadband. And when you say broadband, you really mean high-speed internet, just so everybody understands what we're talking about. But it is a necessity that really the pandemic made us more aware of. I think in past years, there might have been some conversations of, everybody just wants to watch Netflix or play games, but that's not it. It is needed for all areas of everyday life and our economy.
It is. I tell you, I go back to Steve Jobs, and to think for a minute that the smartphone wasn't introduced until 2007. It's pretty amazing to think about it. One of the things Steve Jobs did, I came from the digital media realm and spent a lot of time studying Steve Jobs. And one of the things he said was that in his effort to create these devices, the smartphone as we know it today, the iPad, of course, they continue to crank out incredible other technology. I'm working off of an Apple laptop as we speak. But one of the things he said is they're going to be intuitive. They're going to be so intuitive that whether you're an elderly person who's never been around technology before or whether you're a 1-year-old, you'll be able to pick up this technology and pretty immediately be able to operate it because it's so intuitive. And now I have grandkids, and I've watched my grandkids work on an iPad at the age of 1-year-old. I got a 2-year-old now that you put an iPad in front of him and he can navigate all over the place. It is incredible what it does. Looking at it just from the point of view of being a learning tool, it's the capacity that young brains have to take in new information and take advantage of new technologies. I mean, if we want to advance Mississippi, if we want to really advance Mississippi, we need to get high-speed capabilities and these tools in the hands of every family in the state of Mississippi, no matter what your color, no matter what your socio-demographic situation is, everyone has an equal opportunity when technology is in front of them to sort of unveil what's capable in those brains. And when you look at it from that point of view, Sally, your job is incredibly important.
It is. It is a big job. And my office, we were created by the legislature in 2022. I think April 13th, we're nearing our 1 year birthday, but we really didn't get cranked up until July 1 of 2022. So we've a short time in existence, but we have a big job ahead of us, and I've got a great staff, and we are blowing and going.
Well, I think it was important to have this office, and we'll talk more specifically about the multiple framework of the office. But as you pointed out, one of the reasons why we talked a lot about it, we talked a lot about it, a little bit about it before the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic brought into, real clear focus why people needed to have the ability to work remotely, and especially in that realm, school, being able to do education remotely. And then you had federal dollars starting to come down. You saw the Mississippi legislature start to really get focused on it. I had Senator Joel Carter on the show before. I've talked to the speaker about it with the lieutenant governor as well. But everyone was focused on it. I think if there was if you were going to try to get everybody together in a unified message, you may not have been able to do it as clearly as you were able to do it in sort of a post-pandemic, or certainly in a pandemic scenario. And Mississippi was serious about it, weren't they?
Exactly. I think the pandemic maybe helped us all realize the need and helped us all work together a little bit. And, the need for high-speed internet goes across socioeconomic lines. It goes across a lot of, there's no Republican, no Democrat. Everybody's upset when their computer is just spinning and they can't get good service. So I do think we had a tremendous focus on it, and really started back in 2018. I was in the legislature at that time with the Broadband Enabling Act, and allowed our co-ops to go into the business. And then many of those co-ops got funding. So it's really been great to kind of see how this has progressed. And I've been fortunate to be a part of that.
I'm a Coast Electric customer here. I live on the northern shore of Biloxi Bay, in the city limits of Biloxi. You would think that would be Mississippi Power, but it's not. It's Coast Electric. And I've had Ron Barnes on many times. Ron's a very, very close friend of mine. We've worked in the community together long before Katrina hit, and certainly after Katrina, very closely. And to see the rural co-ops get into the business, you couldn't have asked for a better partner. And then I think about my place up in the Mississippi Delta with Delta Power. And as I mentioned before the show started, we had an antenna Wi-Fi because of where our lodge was in reference to the antenna. We actually had pretty good Wi-Fi, but man, watching them lay that fiber optics, I'm talking about Delta Power specifically, coming through the Mississippi Delta in places you would have never seen fiber laid before. That that played out. I don't know how many thousands of miles, millions of miles. I don't know if cable has been laid in this state just in the past 2 or 3 years. It's got to be unbelievable.
It is. I don't know the specific amounts. I do know that one specific program that was funded through CARES Act funding, there was more than 1,000 miles of fiber that was put out. I was at the public utility staff at the time, and that CARES Act funding program was given to the staff for administration, and so we handled that from that office. And 1,000 miles.
And it's all using the latest technology, It
is. And that's what's important, because, we do have, Mississippi does have a lot of unserved areas in the state. So when we go to serve those areas, we want to kind of leapfrog ahead. We want to make sure that it's future-proof, that the technology that is there will not be out of date in 5 years or even 10 years.
So let's take a step back for a second. You became a lawyer and a mother along the way, but somewhere you decided you wanted to get into public life. How did that evolution happen?
Well, actually, that happened before I became a lawyer and a mom. I went to Mississippi University for Women. I went to the W, and while I was at the W, there was a move to consolidate a lot of the universities. And so I spent some time at the legislature on behalf of my school. I was a 19-year-old. And I remember sitting in the Senate gallery and looking down and thinking, man, I really want to be there one day. And so it was always in the back of my mind to run for office. And, I practiced law, family, moved to kind of a different area of the state. But a seat came open when Cindy Hyde-Smith ran for agriculture commissioner and left the Senate seat for Lincoln County. I still live in Brookhaven. That seat was open, and I said, you know what, I want to run for it. So
let's pick it up right there on the other side, because we're at the end of this segment. But we're visiting with Sally Doty. She has a key role in the state around all things broadband, and we're going to be sort of zeroing in on all of those aspects here shortly. But when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with. Welcome back to Coast View. I enjoy doing this show because it gives me the opportunity to meet new people. A lot of people on this show I've worked with in the community for many years, a lot of emerging leaders I don't know or didn't know, and now I've had the opportunity to do that as well. But I didn't know Sally Doty. I mentioned to her before the show began. I remember reading her name. But anyway, she's had several iterations in her life, and when we were talking before we went to the break, that she was involved in a leadership role relative to Mississippi University for Women, and while she was in the Capitol, she looked down and said, one day I would like to be there, and an open seat came available, and we went to break. She mentioned she ran for that seat, and how did it feel to jump into politics and have to go through the process?
It's a bit of a shock to the system, but it was so exciting to me, and to really have an opportunity for public service, kind of on a larger scale. I'm an attorney. I practice law, but at the time I had taken a couple of years off to spend time with my children and been involved in a lot of volunteer organizations. So, which are great, grassroots organizations. But in, working with my elementary school, what I realized is, as a legislator, my goodness, to have the opportunity to have input on a statewide basis was just incredible. So I loved my time in the legislature. I loved it, or else I hated it sometimes. It's all rolled into one. But it was such a tremendous opportunity, and I just appreciate anyone who will put their name on the ballot and who will serve, because it is a tough job.
Yeah, it's see, Sally, the interesting thing, and I've had many legislators on the show, and we've talked about it. They all kind of describe it the same way. It's kind of a love-hate relationship, because what drives you into the public life is the fact that you want to get something done. But the legislative process, by its nature, is a relatively slow process, and the reason it's slow, I mean, that's democracy in action. Yes. Is to keep bad things from happening. It's even great bills sometimes takes multiple iterations to get through the process. And for you, you strike me as being someone who is very can-do and very results-oriented. And I bet that was very frustrating for you.
It was frustrating, but when I arrived and was sworn in, and after about the first month, I realized that was the way things worked. So I set about working on things kind of behind the scenes, supporting perhaps older, more senior, maybe not older, but more, more senior members of the legislature, I'd take the 500-page bill if I needed to, and I'd be the one handling it in committee. But, I wanted to help move policy. And so I'm glad to work in whatever capacity. But it's been very interesting to me. I've been out. I left in 2020. And over the past couple of years, I've had some bills that, I consider my bills, things that I worked on that now have been passed and come into fruition, even though, I first maybe introduced the bill 5 years ago. So it's a process. It takes some time, and it's for a reason. Yeah.
Well, listen, it's important to know the process and the way that you got to do it. And I was in looking at your bio, the opportunity to be a vice chairman of the finance committee, to be able to be chairman of Judiciary A. Yeah. Those are two great committees to really understand how it all works, man. I mean, you're dealing with the money on one side and dealing with process. And other really important things related to the legislature on the other, you probably had to realize when you were in that moment that, even if you didn't stay in the legislature, what you're learning, you'll be able to carry that with you the rest of your life.
It was such a wonderful opportunity. And, it was difficult for me to step away from the legislature, but I had this opportunity and I felt like it was time.
Well, you had, as a sort of a prerequisite to your current role, having the opportunity to chair the Energy Committee and being involved in that, in what we just talked about with Mississippi Electric Cooperatives and their broadband business. What a great sort of foundation laid for you to be in the role that you're in today. Hey, one other question about your time in the legislature. When you went into the legislature, it was 2011, 2012?
2012.
Okay, so how many women were in the legislature then?
About 15 or 16.
Mm-hmm.
There's always been between 6 or 8 in the Senate, more in the House. So it's a small number. So
I wonder when you talk to your brethren who are still there, and this day and time, having a woman's voice in the process, I can't think of a more important thing, just because we need diversity of thought and whatever. Do you see the legislature has evolved over the years to be more aware of that reality?
Well, we don't have increases in the number of women who are elected. In fact, I think we may have had a decrease. And I believe that is due to kind of the divisiveness that we have among our political parties. It is also due, I think, to the rise of social media, which just makes it so difficult. You were called nasty names for, and it's very difficult. And I think our women in Mississippi, we're all very family oriented, and not that the men are not, but women are often the caretakers. And, it's hard to make that decision to put yourself through that sort of scrutiny, and not only yourself, but your children as well, and your family. Yeah. So it's tough. So everybody who's watching that, when you call your legislator a scumbag, I mean, let's think about it. Let's kind of think about what you're saying, and perhaps say, I disagree with your position, and maybe not make it quite so personal.
Well, Sally, it will not surprise you to learn that as a publisher, you think about a publisher of a newspaper, the kind of input that I got, especially later in my career as we led major strategic initiatives, change efforts in communities, I was often a big time target. And so I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to be in that position in the social media world. And I've said on the show many times that people are willing to say things when they're sitting in the quietness of their bedroom on their smartphones that they would not say to you in person. They don't think about the ramifications of it. And the other part of it, which we've had full shows here on Coast View about, because again, I came from digital media, I understand how algorithms work and the social media piece of it works, is that when you have conflict in the social media world, they're not working to sort of diminish that conflict. They actually, by the way the algorithm works, they're trying to turn it up. They're wanting to pour salt on the wound. So to be in public life today, you have to have incredibly thick skin. It's just the reality of it, and it's tough. And I think your perspective is actually really important. Actually, that some people, principled people who care deeply about what their family thinks and about what their kids think and so on, it's it can be tough, and you have to make huge sacrifices, way more than you would have made before social media came along. Huge sacrifices. And
I often say, used to somebody might be on their front porch and say, oh, that, say something about you. Well, now it is on social media and it lives forever, and it can be shared and shared and shared. It's a tough environment. But I had 3 older sisters, so I had very thick skin.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Good for you. And I also do. If I didn't, I'd be in serious trouble. But the thing that always kept me grounded was that I have a wonderful marriage. I have an incredible wife, Ann, who's been just a great supporter of mine throughout our marriage, and 3 incredible kids. And I always said that with all the noise out here, I never lost sight of what was most important, and that is when I got home, my family was all that was important. I didn't have fault. I had friends that I knew through my business, hundreds and hundreds, But my core friends never changed. Through the successes in my life and even into retirement, the core friends are exactly the same as they always were. I never got hung up in the celebrity of the big jobs that I had along the way. It was never that important to me. But you have to be willing to do that, because at the end of the day, it can be very, very tough. So look, you come into this role having been appointed by the governor. In a way, given all this that we've talked about, it was sort of the perfect foundation for you to move into that. You had to have been excited about this opportunity.
I was extremely excited about this opportunity. There was some, as the legislation made its way through the House and the Senate last year. I didn't quite know where it would land. I was at the public utilities staff at the time. I was the executive director there, and for a while it looked like it might be there. But I think it really is good. We are a separate entity underneath the Department of Finance Administration, but a separate entity, and I'm able to devote all of my time and energy and resources. And I think, as Governor Reeves said, he said, I want somebody who wakes up every day and their number one focus is, how do we get broadband out to all of Mississippi? And having that clarity of focus really is important. So I'm glad we are where we are, and we're working.
Well, Sally, I agree with the governor, and I agree with you that, it could have been under the Public Service Commission in that arena, but the reality is it's too important that to have it as its own office, which is typically, the Department of Finance. This is where organizations like this would fit in. I'm thrilled they did this, because it makes a statement that broadband access is really important to the state. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Sally Doty about all things broadband in Mississippi. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast View. If you think about the evolution of conversations that we've had here on Coast View about broadband access, and efforts by Mississippi to make broadband accessible, high-speed internet accessible to every person who wants it in the state of Mississippi, and what it really means to Mississippi's future, then you can understand why this conversation around creating this new office, BEAM is the name of the office, but it stands for Office of Broadband Expansion and Accessibility of Mississippi. And Sally Doty, who's joining me now, is the first executive director of that organization. She was appointed by Governor Tate Reeves. It's a separate office in Mississippi, which, as we were saying before we went to break, really important, actually, because it makes a statement about how important this is. We don't want any noise. We want you, Sally Doty, and your team focused on reaching the goal to do as much and as good a job with broadband access in this state as we possibly can do, given the money that's available to us. So anyway, you come in, you get appointed, and you have to start from scratch. So what do you do? Tell me about that.
Well, I did bring 2 or 3 employees with me from the public utilities staff, so it wasn't totally from scratch. And those were positions within the telecommunications portion of the public service. It's really not the commission, so I was at the staff. But telecom really, there's not much regulation now. We had been involved in more working with high-speed internet, so it was kind of a natural transition over here. So that helped my transition. But, I had to hire people. We didn't have computers for a while. We had to work through some of the bureaucratic hurdles that you have. We are on we have kind of our office space is a bit disjointed. We're in the Woolfolk building, the state office building, that it's, we share space with it's the Board of Psychology has their office right in the middle of our office. So we can stop by for some counseling if we need it. But it was a challenge to get everything up and running. And immediately upon us getting kind of our office situated, we had a lot of deadlines for this federal funding. We had to apply for several different planning grants. So it was a lot all at once.
But see, again, administratively, you have to get all these pieces put in place. You have to build the foundation from which you're going to work, because as you focus on all of these different components that are part of your goals, you got to have the support. You got to have the mechanism in place. You have to have the team focused on that goal. So it's a nerdy part of the work. It's sometimes difficult to do it within the guise of sort of how government operates. But once you get that done, then as you describe the goals that you have and how are you going to do those, talk to us about that.
So our goal and our mandate with federal funding that is coming down is to provide service, high-speed internet service to every location in Mississippi. And there are a lot of opportunities. It's kind of a one-time opportunity of funding that's coming out. And, we will develop a 5-year plan to show how all of that funding will be spread across the state, develop a workforce development plan, a lot of different parts of that. But that's the overall goal, service to everyone within the state, and service that is affordable at some level for everyone in our state.
So does your office actually help to administer the various tranches of money that are coming through the state? Give me a sense of that.
So I believe we have 4 or 5 different grant programs now. So the upcoming program is called the Capital Projects Fund. It is some ARPA money. It is $162 million that will go for broadband access, and we are in the process. We've just closed our mapping challenge. We had a statewide map of eligible projects out, and different providers could say, "Oh, yeah, I already cover that," or "I don't cover that," or So we have kind of a very complicated challenge process. We've just finished with that, and part of my job has been to map the state to see who has service and who does not. And so we have been very involved in that and have a great contractor that's helped us through that. So CPF, the largest amount of money is BEAD, Broadband Equity Access Deployment. It's about nationwide a $43 billion with a B $billion pot of money will be divided among the states based on your number of unserved and underserved locations. So that's why that mapping was even more important. We don't know yet how much money we will receive. We're supposed to know on June the 30th. I can't wait to find out. But I think Mississippi, we will get close to $1 billion. Some estimates have us getting more money than that. So we will see on June 30th. There is a program, BIP, Broadband Infrastructure Program, is a smaller program that our office actually applied for while we were at the staff. It's a $32 million project. We've got some of those different projects going on around the state. There is a digital skills and accessibility grant that really is providing funding to close the digital divide in Mississippi, provide some funding for skills training, whether that be how to, very elementary, how to turn your computer on, use a mouse, or it might be how to use a spreadsheet, how to use Word, different, all kinds of different resources. So we have several different funding streams that we are working through. Several of them we're still in the planning phases for that. For BEAD, we're in the planning phase. Digital skills and accessibility, we're in the planning phase. So we have a lot on our plate.
When I think about the mapping, I can't imagine how, that's extraordinarily important. We'll come back to the mapping in just a second, because I'm actually curious to see how far back do you have to go where the mapping showed, especially in rural areas, very little accessibility, and where are we today? We'll come back to that in just a second. But what I'm curious about is, when you look at it and you see the progress that we've made in a very short period of time, how often do you go back in your thinking and say, man, if we had not engaged the rural electric cooperatives in this process as this primary partner, where would we be?
Yeah, they have been such a partner for the state of Mississippi. And really that goes back to that CARES Act funding during the height of the pandemic. It was during, I call it the COVID legislative session. The decision was made to put a chunk of money into broadband expansion. And I'm going to have to say, I wasn't very focused on that. I was chair of JUD-A. I was in with some other issues. I was not involved in splitting up the CARES Act money. But it was very important. And in fact, Mississippi was one of the first states to use that money for broadband expansion, and we weren't quite sure that the feds were going to approve it. We kind of took a step out, and our thinking was, they're not going to try to claw back money that's really used for broadband expansion to rural areas of Mississippi. Let's, if it's within the realm of reason, let's go for it. So we did, but that was such an important step. We worked with Coast Electric from that time forward, provided them some grant funding, and just look at what's the fruition of what has happened with that money.
Yeah, it's amazing. Again, I think because of all the conversations around involving the electric cooperatives and the discussion around broadband, that broadband was sort of top of mind for people. And then, of course, when then you get to the pandemic and there's a screaming, very compelling case for action for creating access opportunities. And I think our state leaders got very aligned quickly, frankly, around putting, very, very significant money toward that. And then as you start thinking about all these other buckets that you're talking about of money that's coming into the process, it really gives us something to build off of. And, this is an American conversation. Every state in America digital access, that's the key to the game. In terms of education, in terms of opening minds, in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship and economic development. And the list goes on and on. Every state's talking about it, but Mississippi got on it quick and has really built off of it. When you look at those maps and you think about how much progress we've made in a very short period of time, I know you probably, because of the way your mind works, you see where we've got work to do. But just flip it for just a second and say, gosh, how much progress have we made?
We have, and you can see my maps behind me in the window. I'm looking at those maps every day, and it really is incredible. And as I talk to people about mapping, I always preface it by saying, hey, it changes every day. It's changing because we are having so much build out in the state of Mississippi. Now, if you're in one of those rural areas, you may not feel like that, but there's a tremendous amount of build out, and there will be in the next couple of years as well.
Yeah, it's Mississippi again. One of our challenges is whether it be healthcare or broadband access or any number of other education, is that we have a lot of rural areas in the state. So getting service to truly all the rural area, it is a job. If you've gone on back roads of Mississippi, you know what we're talking about. And laying cable for fiber optics is an expensive proposition, to say the least. Hey, when we come back, we'll have our final segment with Sally Doty from the Office of Broadband in Mississippi, and we'll kind of clean it all up and have the conversations we haven't had yet. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to COSIUM. Really enjoying my visit with Sally Doty, who's the director of the Mississippi Broadband Office. And as I often say, Sally, some of the best conversations happen during the break. It's just as we're getting to know each other better, and it's been a real pleasure to get to know you better. And I can tell that you're just the perfect person for this role, not just because of your foundation that you've laid, but you have a passion for this. You understand the connection between the work that you're doing. And by the way, not all state agency directors have that direct correlation sometimes, but there's a direct link between what you do and the effectiveness of your office's work and the ability to, if you're talking about exponentially leapfrogging Mississippi forward, I don't know anyone who would argue against broadband as the fastest thing we can do that would help Mississippi just leapfrog from where it is today.
Yeah, in so many different areas too, and healthcare, and education, in economics. It's such an opportunity. So our office, we have a real sense of urgency in administering this federal money that's coming down, but it is a process, and this is not going to happen overnight. We are still, there's some funding that's been approved, and I often get frustrated because from DC we see tweets, oh, internet for all is coming, but it's a slower process. So bear with us, but it's coming, and there are great opportunities for the state.
Most things worth having takes time. That's just the reality of it. And the good news is, as you pointed out, in latter part of June, you find out how much money Mississippi is going to get. But But that, you're talking about a kick in the butt. That's some serious money.
It is serious money, and with serious money comes some serious planning. And so we are engaging in that right now. We're reaching out to our community colleges and IHL to help us gather some data. We have got technical experts, we've got mapping experts, and so I think we really put together a great team to develop our 5-year plan. Then we will have an initial proposal to get 20% of the money released. So we have a lot in store over the next 6 months. No vacation for me this summer, I don't think.
Well, that's I'm still got to have your time away to keep your batteries ready, revving and ready to go. So tell me about your team. What kind of team did you have to build?
So my deputy director is Kyle Brown. Kyle was at the public utilities staff with me and really had worked on that CARES Act product that we did, program that we did in that capacity. Angel Stenmark had been director of telecommunications at the staff for several years, so she just had a tremendous background. So brought them over with me, and then 2 or 3 other folks kind of rounded out. Our communications director, Ashley Johnson, has been setting up a visit on the coast I want to make sure we talk about. So we've got a small team. We only have 6 people. Then we have a contract worker, Angelique Lee, Angelique's on the city council as well, the Jackson City Council, which we checked with the ethics board. It's okay for us to hire her. She can do this. So Angelique is working on our digital skills and accessibility grant that we have. So we've got a great close-knit team, and then augmented and supplemented by our contractors that are helping us.
Yeah, which is all across the state. So you have a broadband community meeting coming up on Wednesday, April the 19th at 5:30 at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College at the Perkinson campus. What are you hoping to do there?
So all of our grants require us to have community engagement meetings. And I will tell you, at first, I was kind of rolling my eyes, and I was a check the box thing I've got to do. But we have now had about 50 community engagement meetings around the state. I've been to the Delta 15 times. And some meetings we have are small. Maybe they're with Board of Supervisors or some aldermen, and others are large where it truly is just community members. But community members who do not have access, they want to know, and they want to talk about the issues that they have, and they want to know what opportunities are coming. And it's very important to go out into those communities and talk about this issue of bringing high-speed internet into their community. So it's been very eye-opening. It's been very engaging as we travel to people around the state.
Listen, every organization, every opportunity I got, both at this in my role as a publisher and in the community work, I coveted the opportunity to do community meetings, because you learn things. You learn things that you never thought that you would be thinking about. And people are smart. They have their perspectives, and helps sort of, I don't know, it makes it for a better product at the end of the day, doesn't it?
It does. And we need community input as we draft our plan, and we want to gather that data. And some people along the way we've been able to help. Now, I tell people we're not going to intercede with you with the providers unless you've already called and you've already sat on hold. But sometimes there is just some issue that we're able to help out with as well. So we are glad to do that. So
we're coming to the end of our time together, but it's a broadband community meeting. It's really important information, incidentally. So if you if you want to know more, it's Wednesday, April the 19th at 5:30 at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College at the Perkinson campus. It's going to be at the Student Union there. I'm sure you can just go search it and find out all you need to know about it. But listen, Sally, it has been a pleasure to visit with you today.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this so much. We've covered a range of topics, haven't we?
We have. This has been Sally Doty, the director of the Mississippi Broadband Office, and we'll have you back. I look forward to checking in with you from time to time.
I would be glad to. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.